So with all the madness popping up about the S7, the S7 Edge, the LG G5, I felt it was right for me to review something a little bit different before I start getting into the more premium handsets of the year. So with that being said, I've never touched an Asus phone before, never reviewed one, never even used one. So I wanted to try something a little bit different for myself and for you guys. So this is the review, at least my experience, with the Asus Zenfone Zoom. So as far as the unboxing goes, it's going to be short, simple, and to the point. You get a bunch of paperwork, you get a lanyard because this phone is centered around the camera, you get a micro USB to standard USB cable, a charging brick, a pair of earbuds, some replacement earbuds to match the size of your ear hole, and you also get a SIM card ejection tool. So let's take a look at the device itself, starting with the build quality. The back is done in like a soft plastic material. It reminds me of the Note 4 almost. It's like a faux leather type design. You can see some fake stitching there. It does have a removable back exposing a 3000 milliamp hour battery underneath, as well as a micro SD card slot and a micro SIM card slot. Now, the micro SD card slot is expandable up to 64 gigabytes, and you're gonna need that to use the camera to get the most out of it. The phone is relatively thick and it is relatively heavy, but that's all because of the camera located on the back. It does feature a metal trim around the sides and edges, and on the front you have a 5.5-inch 1080p display protected by Gorilla Glass 3. On the bottom you have some physical capacitive buttons, but they don't light up. However, if you're in a low lit area, to me having those buttons light up is kind of valuable, and these do not light up whatsoever. On the top side of the phone, you're gonna find your headphone jack and a microphone. On the right-hand side, you're gonna find your dedicated volume up and down buttons, and right below that, you're gonna find a power button. Now, if you go all the way to the bottom, you're gonna find a record button for when you're shooting video, and then a dedicated camera button. If you hold it down, it launches the camera, and once you're in the camera, if you press that button, it activates the shutter. On the bottom, you're gonna find a micro USB port used for charging and syncing, another microphone, and then a little slit there to the left to attach the lanyard. The phone's construction is actually really solid, and it gives you a very premium feel. However, like I said, it is a bit bulky, so if you're looking for something that's slim and lightweight, this is probably not the way to go. The display on the Zenfone Zoom is actually really good. It has great viewing angles. I found colors to not necessarily be the most accurate, but you can go into the settings and you can change different modes from vivid, standard, natural, so on and so forth. And you can also tweak the white balance of the display itself or adjust specific colors and contrast. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in that aspect if you don't like the way it looks straight out of the box. So day-to-day performance, the phone performs well. I mean, it's not going to give you Galaxy S7 or LG G5 or iPhone-like performance, but I noticed minimal hiccups. The hiccups that I did notice were actually more involved in the software, which I'll cover in just a minute because it is a bit thick. But in terms of gaming or just doing day-to-day tasks, browsing the web, watching videos, scrolling through my home pages, adding widgets, anything along those lines, it performed great. This phone definitely, despite what I've seen in other reviews, for me, performed incredibly well. It doesn't get too hot during gaming, and I didn't notice any drop frames or hiccups during high intensive or graphic intensive games. The 3000 milliamp hour battery, it's gonna give you pretty good battery life. It's not gonna give you the best. I would expect anywhere between 3.5 to 5 hours of screen on time, depending on your use and the network that you're on. But for me, I was getting about 3.5 hours to 4 hours on the AT&T network, connected strictly to mobile and hardly being on Wi-Fi until the end when I started testing other things other than battery life. And then I went back to my iPhone because that is my primary device that I use day in and day out. So in terms of software, you're looking at Asus's Zen UI on top of Android 5.0. This is a bit of a letdown because I have yet to find anywhere where they're releasing an update for Android 6.0. And what makes things worse is the fact that it's running Android 5.0, not 5.1 or above, 5.0. And this phone is not a new device. It's been out now for a little bit. And I don't know, it disappointed me a little bit. The software is really thick, meaning that it's going to be more similar to TouchWiz. So if you're looking for like that stock Android experience, this is definitely not the UI to get, but it does have some benefits. Like I love the one-handed mode, double tapping the home button will shrink the screen and you can actually resize it from there. And you can also decide whether or not you want it on your left hand or your right hand, making it a lot easier to use because of the size of this phone. Another useful feature is whenever you download an app, for instance, like a game, it's going to try to create a folder from that app and then, keep everything organized within different folders. In other words, like if I have 3 games installed on my phone and I download another, it's gonna automatically put it in my games folder if it acknowledges that it's a game. And if you download like a note-taking app, it's going to automatically put it in a productivity folder with your other apps to keep everything nice and neat. Going into settings though, it can be a bit overwhelming because there's just so many. It really reminds me of TouchWiz. In fact, I think TouchWiz isn't as bad as the Zenfone UI or the Zen UI when it comes to the feature set. One thing I really hated was the keyboard. Even though it looks, like the stock Google keyboard, it's not. It does lag. And I don't know, I feel completely overwhelmed looking at all of those symbols, and it's not a very big keyboard. I don't know, I didn't like it at all. So I, of course, had to download the stock Google keyboard, and then I felt much better with the entire process. So let's talk about the main focus of this phone, and that's the rear-facing camera. This phone is pretty much going head-to-head with the Lumia 1020. Now, when the Lumia 1020 was announced or released a while ago, I was on Verizon, so I never truly got to experience that phone. But I've seen a lot of great comments and positive reviews regarding the Lumia 1020, and people still use it to this day. But the Asus Zenfone Zoom, I don't feel is on that level. So the specifications of the camera are the fact that A, it has image stabilization, it is 13 megapixels, has an aperture of f2.7 to f4.8 as you zoom in, because it does feature optical zoom, which really does work pretty good. It's still a smartphone camera, and on top of that, it's not a flagship smartphone camera. Flagship smartphone cameras are getting great. I mean, the Nexus 6P, awesome, and the iPhone 6s Plus and 6s, Galaxy S6, Note 5. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Those cameras are great, and even though the Asus Zenfone Zoom is centered around the camera, I just don't feel that it really competes with those. Now, it does feature laser autofocus for fast autofocusing, and again, I didn't find it to be that good. LG's laser autofocus is definitely much better and more accurate. The Zenfone Zoom just didn't quite do it for me, and I ended up using manual focus a lot of the times just because of that reason. It captures video in 1080p only, so if you're looking for a 4K smartphone camera, again, not the way to go, but the 1080p is not bad. It does do slow motion in 720p, but the quality isn't that great. The actual camera software is really feature packed, just like the rest of the software on this phone. I mean, you have settings like HDR, beauty mode, panorama, sphere, low light, and then you have night mode, which I don't know why you have to have both of those. I mean, night mode should be low light, but anyways, you have both of those. You have manual mode, you have a focus mode, which is similar to what Samsung and LG introduced a while back, giving you the ability to change your focus point in post rather than having to do it as you're shooting the photo. It works good. I mean, again, it's gonna depend on your usage and how you use it. If you use it properly, then it's gonna work good. HDR does not work the best. It's still your typical Android HDR, which does not give you true HDR. It's more like I don't know how to explain it, like a very contrasty, over-sharpened, and saturated image. And it does brighten up some things, but it looks too fake. HDR is supposed to brighten up the dark areas and then kind of balance out the overly exposed areas, giving you a much natural image, and it just doesn't really do that. The camera on the front of this phone is a 5 megapixel camera, and it's average. It's not gonna give you mind-blowing results, but it's not gonna disappoint either, depending on your lighting, of course. If you start getting into low light, it's gonna be incredibly noisy, and the same thing can be said with the rear-facing camera. But as far as, getting mind-blowing results from this phone, you're not going to get that, but you're gonna get average results. I mean, you're gonna get decent results that's not gonna disappoint you, especially given the price point of this device. But if you're buying this phone specifically for the camera-related features, I would skip it and invest in 1020, especially if you're on a GSM network, since they are AT&T exclusives. But you can get them unlocked from eBay and other third-party retailers. But personally, I just find that from the reviews that I've seen on the 1020, it's going to perform much better than this phone, and you could probably get it for cheaper than this phone. So overall, my day-to-day use of this phone has not been the best, but it's not been the worst. It's just been average. I mean, using it as a phone worked great, texting, emailing, phone calls, whatever you want to do during your day-to-day use, it worked great for me. It's just, I wouldn't spend the money on this device if it was up to me. Personally, there's a lot of other phones on the market that are cheaper than this, that give you a great camera and a higher megapixel count, so that way you can crop in during post instead of having to use that optical zoom. And besides, when you start talking about optical zoom, that's pretty much the crossing point into smartphone photography and getting a nice point and shoot like the RX 100. Other than that, guys, that's pretty much been my review and my experience with the Asus Zenfone Zoom. If you guys like this video, make sure you drop me a thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content, and I will be covering the Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge. So don't let this video fool you. You will be seeing some content from me regarding those devices and the G5. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Follow me on all my social media networks, and of course, be easy.